I wasn't looking for anything. Not a hookup. Not a heart-to-heart. Definitely not a near-panic attack over the lack of breathable cotton beneath my jeans. I just wanted a quiet drink. The bar was dim, the kind of soft violet lighting that made everyone look slightly better than they probably were. Music low, murmurs high. It was a Thursday. Off night, thank God. And I'd chosen the corner stool like I always did. Close enough to the action that I didn't feel like a ghost, but far enough to keep my back to the wall and my thoughts in my glass. I'd had a hell of a week. Laundry day at my friend Lena's turned into laundry all day and crash on her couch, because my dryer exploded mid-cycle and I was too broke to care. She'd tossed me a clean shirt this morning on my way out, and I pulled it on, not even realizing until about halfway through my first drink that something felt breezy. Not emotionally, physically. I adjusted on the bar stool, shifted again. The denim tugged against skin in a way it shouldn't. No barrier, no cushion, no familiar waistband riding my hips. Oh no. Oh hell no. I wasn't wearing underwear. I must have forgotten in the rush to get out of Lena's place. The shirt, the hoodie, the jeans, all accounted for. But the most important piece? I froze with my drink halfway to my mouth. I could feel my face heating, the kind of blush that starts low in your neck and climbs like a fever. I tried to keep calm, tried to focus on anything else. That's when he sat down beside me. I thought Thursdays were for the introverts, a voice said, smooth as bourbon and twice as warm. I turned, and there he was. Late 30s, maybe early 40s, if he was lying well. Tall, with that careless kind of confidence people usually only fake. Black button-down rolled at the sleeves, forearms resting on the counter like he belonged there. His hair was messy, in a deliberate way, and his eyes were that untrustworthy shade of storm gray, the kind that made you want to lean in even if you knew better. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, already sitting. I managed a smile, small and probably crooked. "Not if you're not allergic to awkward silences." He chuckled. "I actually prefer them. Less pressure to perform." I took a sip of my drink to hide the twitch of my mouth. He smelled like cedar and something faintly herbal, like cologne that whispered instead of screamed. "Dangerous combo." "I'm Jamie," he said, lifting his glass to me. I tapped mine against his automatically. "Eli." "Well, Eli," he said, "you have the look of a man who just realized something terribly important." I laughed, a little too sharp, a little too real. "That's disturbingly accurate." He raised an eyebrow. "Do I get to guess?" "Please don't." Jamie leaned back slightly, the corner of his mouth turning up like he knew he'd hit a nerve. "Did you leave the stove on, forget an anniversary, accidentally text your boss something meant for your ex?" "Okay, wow," I muttered. "Is this a game for you?" "Only when people look like they're trying very hard not to crawl out of their skin." I shifted again. The jeans chafed. The horror settled in a second time. God, I could feel everything. And the worst part? Now I was hyper-aware of him noticing me being hyper-aware. It was like a spiral of embarrassment feeding on itself. "Okay," I said, laughing nervously. "You want the truth?" He leaned in. "Always." "I forgot to wear underwear," I blurted. There was a beat, just a beat, and then he barked. Out a laugh, not cruel, not mocking, just surprised and absolutely delighted. "That is," he said, grinning, "the most honest thing I've heard in weeks." "I didn't mean to. I was at a friend's place doing laundry. I borrowed a shirt, and it just slipped my mind." Jamie held up a hand. "You don't have to explain. Truly. I respect the vulnerability." "God," I groaned, covering my face. "Kill me now." "No way. You just became the most interesting person in this bar." I peeked between my fingers. He was smiling. Really smiling. That soft kind of amused where the eyes crinkle and you forget what shame feels like for just a second. I should go, I muttered, sliding off the stool and wincing at the sensation of denim on bare skin. Eli, he said, catching my wrist lightly, not gripping, just grounding. Hey, I was kidding. You're good. I shook my head. I know. I just need a minute. He nodded, letting go instantly. Fair. As I walked toward the restroom, awkward, over-aware of my every step, I could feel his eyes on me. But not in a judgmental way, just curious, open. The bathroom door closed behind me and I leaned against it, exhaling like I'd been underwater. Just a quiet drink, I'd told myself. Right, just a drink, and somehow now, maybe a beginning. The bathroom was too bright. That cheap clinical lighting that makes every pore and panic line feel like a crime scene. I splashed cold water on my face, bracing my hands on the edge of the sink, and stared at myself in the mirror. What was I even doing? I wasn't some suave bar flirt with a witty comeback for every curveball. I was the guy who forgot underwear, who panic-sweated through a borrowed shirt, who'd sworn off anything resembling romance after my last boyfriend ghosted me mid-rent. But there he was, Jamie, laughing like I was a story he wanted to keep reading. I dried my face on the weak excuse for a paper towel and took a breath. I could leave. No shame in ducking out. He probably already forgot about me, moved on to someone who didn't announce their wardrobe failures over whiskey. I stepped back into the bar. He was still there, sitting on the same stool, same relaxed posture, same half-smile when he saw me. You, okay? He asked, tilting his head. Or did the bar stool offend you personally? I stared at him for a second. And then, without any preamble, filter, or dignity, I blurted, I wasn't joking, he blinked. About the underwear? About everything. The weird week, the rushed laundry, the fact that I was so not planning to talk to anyone, tonight, let alone someone like you. His brows lifted in that curious, amused way again. Someone like me? You know, attractive, confident, entirely too observant. He laughed, and I laughed too, because what else can you do when the floor doesn't open up and swallow you whole? He stuck out his hand, formal this time. Jamie Scott, traveling photographer, occasional flirt, here all week. I took it. Eli Reyes, local overthinker, recovering relationship optimist, probably about to be known as Commando Guy forever. Jamie grinned. Trust me, I've heard worse first impressions. At least yours is original. We fell into something easy after that, the kind of flow you don't expect, like a song you forgot you knew all the words to. He told me about his photography. Mostly people, sometimes landscapes, always moments that felt real. He traveled light, lived out of a suitcase and a camera bag. This was his third visit to the city, and he still hadn't found a diner he loved. I told him about my job, graphic designer for a small studio, mostly ad work. I made logos for vegan dog food brands and startup coffee shops with names like Boutique. It paid the bills, but I couldn't remember the last time I designed something that felt like mine. He didn't judge, didn't interrupt, just listened, really listened, like he was collecting each word carefully. Somewhere in between my second drink and the last slow song on the playlist, I told him about my last boyfriend, the ghosting, the silence that followed, the way it made me feel disposable. He didn't flinch, just nodded. I've had that, he said quietly. Mine left a note, which I guess is the polite version of vanishing. What did it say? Jamie looked at his glass. That I was too much of a dreamer and not enough of a planner. Sounds like he wanted a real estate agent, not a person. He smiled at that. Not big. Just enough. We drifted from stories to silence and back again. It wasn't awkward, just full. Full of the kind of air you don't mind breathing. The bar started to empty. The bartender wiped down the counter, not so subtly. Stacking coasters like closing time was a gentle shove. Jamie looked at me. "I'll walk you home, if that's okay." "No pressure?" I asked, teasing. "No expectations," he said, more serious. And that felt safe. We stepped out into the night together. The air had that cool, just before spring crispness, the kind that made your hoodie feel like armor. We didn't rush. We talked about nothing and everything, about cities we wanted to see, childhood fears, the best flavor of ice cream to eat at midnight. His, pistachio. Mine, mint chip, don't judge. When we reached my building, I stopped at the steps. Jamie didn't lean in, didn't make a move, just looked at me with that same warm, open face. "I'm glad you came back out," he said. "Me, too," I whispered, and I meant it. He nodded, stepping back. "Text me sometime, or don't. Either way, I'll remember you," I smiled. "You mean the guy who showed up without underwear?" He shrugged, turning to walk away. "You're a lot more than that." I watched him disappear around the corner before I climbed the steps. Inside, I sat on the couch for a long time, hoodie still on, heart still loud. I didn't know what tomorrow meant. Didn't know if he was just passing through or if this was something worth leaning into. But I knew how I felt walking, beside him. Like I wasn't disposable. Like maybe, just maybe, I was something someone might remember on purpose. And that was a beginning. Jamie didn't kiss me that night. He just left me with that one parting line, "You're a lot more than that," and disappeared into the night like someone who meant what he said, but wasn't trying to collect anything for saying it. I didn't sleep much. Not because I was overthinking, for once, but because I couldn't stop playing his voice in my head, the low ease of it, like it knew something I hadn't dared to believe yet. The next morning, my phone buzzed at 8:14 a.m. "Jamie, coffee? Or are you still emotionally recovering from the denim disaster?" I laughed, alone in my kitchen, holding the phone to my chest for a second before texting back. Me. Only emotionally. My legs have made peace with the experience. The next few days stitched together like one of those quiet movie montages, the kind that sneaks up on you, and before you realize it, everything feels different. We went to a used bookstore that smelled like dust and hope. He picked up a battered poetry collection and read me the first line aloud, right there between the shelves. His voice turned every syllable into something deeper. We ate tacos at 1 a.m. from a truck parked outside. A dive bar. He had hot sauce on his lip and didn't wipe it off until I pointed. And even then, he laughed and made a joke about how it gave him character. We walked through the park one afternoon while he photographed trees, squirrels, the back of my neck when I wasn't looking. "You have a stillness," he said once, peeking at a shot on his camera. "But also this spark. Like you're almost ready to start something." I didn't know how to reply to that. But it sat with me, and every time he texted, I replied faster. Every time we said goodbye, I hoped there'd be a next time. And every time he smiled at me, I wondered what it would feel like to let someone fully see me again. Then, on the fourth day, we sat on a park bench under a sky that couldn't decide whether to hold or spill. He'd just snapped a photo of a crow on a lamppost, and I'd been telling him about a logo client who wanted a yoga brand for cats. We were laughing, loose, warm, when he went quiet. "I don't stay in one place very long," he said, almost apologetically. I looked at him. "I figured. I'm usually here a week, sometimes two, depending on the shoot." "And then you're gone," I said, not accusatory, just naming it. Yeah, he didn't offer a reason, and I didn't ask. But something inside me coiled, a little. I'd been here before. The beginning of a maybe with an expiration date already printed on the box. I'd just started to feel like myself again. And now I was leaning toward someone who might be gone before I even figured out what this feeling was. We walked on in silence, and then, just as the first drop of rain kissed my nose, the sky split open. We ducked under the awning of a closed boutique. Glass doors behind us, the city around us dissolving into puddles. My hair stuck to my forehead. His shirt clung to his shoulders. The rain came down harder than it needed to, like it was trying to be symbolic. Jamie turned to me. "Are you okay?" I nodded, but it wasn't entirely true. I was buzzing, with nerves, with questions, with the ache of wanting something real again. He stepped closer, lifting his hand slowly enough to give me time to step back. I didn't. He brushed a raindrop from my cheek, gentle as anything. His fingers stayed for a second longer than, "Necessary, can I kiss you?" he asked, his voice low and clear. And even though every wall I'd built was screaming at me to be careful, I whispered, "Yeah." He leaned in, and when our lips met, it wasn't fireworks. It wasn't a movie crescendo. It was quiet, soft, like he'd been holding that kiss between us the whole time, and now he was finally giving it room to breathe. I kissed him back, and for the first time in a long, long time, I wasn't thinking about how it might end. I was just there. When we finally pulled apart forehead to forehead, I laughed, breathless and shaky and too full. "This is insane," I said, almost to myself. "You're not even from here," Jamie smiled, close, still holding me like he wasn't in a rush. "But I'm here now. Isn't that enough to start something?" The rain kept falling around us, but under that awning, I felt dry. I felt safe. And maybe I felt seen. I cleaned the apartment twice, once because it needed it, and again because I didn't know what else to do with my nerves. I changed the bulb over the stove. I fluffed the couch pillows. I lit a candle that smelled vaguely like cedar and not at all like desperation. Jamie was coming over. It was his last night in town. I wasn't sure what we were or what we'd become, but I knew I wanted him here. In my space. In my quiet. In the version of my life that didn't come with curated lighting or barstool confidence. He showed up with a bottle of wine and a small bag of pastries from some hidden bakery he'd found that morning. "For breakfast," he said, even though we hadn't talked about him staying. I made pasta. Badly. He insisted it was perfect. We ate on the floor, plates in our laps, legs crossed like we were back in college, trading stories that didn't feel rehearsed anymore. He asked about the scar on my knee. I asked about the tattoo on his ribs. We didn't kiss until later, curled up on the couch beneath a throw blanket that was too small for two grown men, but neither of us minded. It wasn't a night of fireworks or decisions. It was a night of presence. We didn't sleep together. We just slept. His head on my shoulder, my hand curled around his. The kind of closeness that didn't demand anything but honesty. I woke first. Morning. Light spilled in through the blinds, casting long golden lines across the floor. The room smelled faintly like him. Warm skin, coffee, and rain. I blinked sleep from my eyes and found the blanket bunched up around my waist, his side of the couch empty. For a brief, irrational second, I panicked. Had he left? But then I heard it. The soft clink of ceramic in the kitchen. I padded in, barefoot, hoodie half-zipped. Jamie stood there, shirtless, hair a mess, pouring coffee like he did it every morning of his life. He looked over his shoulder and smiled. Slow and sleepy. "Hey," he said, "I didn't want to wake you." "You didn't," I murmured, watching him. The curve of his spine. The quiet way he moved like he belonged. I could have stood there forever. He handed me a mug and kissed the top of my head. Casual, unthinking. My heart did something it hadn't done in a while. Softened. After coffee, he needed to grab his things from the living room. I ducked into the bedroom to change out of my sleep shorts. That's when I saw it. On the middle of my bed, neatly folded, was a brand new pair of boxer briefs, deep navy, my size. Still had the tag. On top of them was a small folded note, written in his handwriting. So next time you panic at the bar, you'll be prepared. Jay. I laughed out loud, sharp and surprised, warmth rushing up my chest. But then, as I lifted the boxers, another note fluttered out from underneath. This one was smaller, quieter. If you ever want more mornings like this, I'll come back. Just say the word. My hands trembled slightly as I read it again, and again. There were no grand declarations, no ultimatums, just the simple truth that I could ask, and he would answer. I sat on the edge of the bed, the notes in my hand, and thought about all the moments that had led here. The awkward bar stool, the laughter, the walks, the rain. The way his presence didn't demand that I be anything but exactly myself. I looked up as he appeared in the doorway, mug in hand, a questioning smile on his face. "Find them?" he asked, nodding toward the bed. I nodded. "You planned that?" Jamie shrugged, unbothered. "Figured it might come in handy someday." I stood, crossed the space between us, wrapped my arms around his bare waist and rested my head against his chest. "Don't disappear," I whispered. "Not without telling me." "I won't," he said. "You'll know where I am, even if it's not here." We held on to each, other like we had time, even if we didn't know how much. And in that soft, golden morning, I realized it didn't matter what came next, not right now. What mattered was this moment. His arms, my heart, and the truth that for once I wasn't hiding from anything. It started with a drink and a missing piece of cotton, but somehow it ended with a man who made me feel like I never had to hide again.